Diaphragmatic breathing. What is it and how do we use it? The very first thing is, and I want to kind of play a little game with you, okay? It's going to sound kind of silly, but I'd really like you to consider what I'm about to say. Pretend we're playing the game Simon Says. And for those of you that are international students and you don't know what that means, Simon Says is a simple little grade school game that we play where Simon says do this. Simon says do that. And then if Simon doesn't say and you do something, you're out of the game, okay? So I want you to always pretend Ken Tamplin, Simon, always tells you that diaphragmatic support is king. Everything emanates from your support mechanism. Everything. So no matter what I tell you, if I don't remind you of your diaphragmatic support first, and you start doing something else, and you're having trouble, and you can't figure out why it is you can't get a certain thing, always go back to your checkpoints. Diaphragmatic support, posture, breathing, all these things. I'm working these in concert, step by step, so that you'll understand individually as you build this mechanism. You go through your checkpoints and make sure you're doing these one right after another, and you're not trying to build one thing when you're losing something else that's supposed to give you the strength to do the thing you're about to do or want to aspire towards. So diaphragmatic breathing, what is it? Now, a lot of people don't even know there's actually two diaphragms. There's one down around the pelvic hairline, and then there's one directly underneath the rib cage, which when we take a breath like this and we go breathe in, by the way, and I want to emphasize something else. Diaphragmatic breathing for yoga is a little different than diaphragmatic breathing for singing. I'll explain that in a second. But so we're going to take a breath from your belly, let's say your whole belly, and I'm going to do a diaphragm of this on the ground in a minute. So here's my breath. I take a breath in. I breathe out. I breathe in. I breathe out. You see, I'm breathing in my whole abdominal cavity. Now, I used to teach that we start with the lower abdominal cavity, like what bel canto teaches this also. Classical opera singing teaches this. Because if you breathe in, a lot of times we take a breath from our chest like this. And we literally tank up with air within the chest, and then we call that, we think we're taking in a good breath. No, actually what we want is we want the ribs already expanded. It's called rib cage expansion. We want the ribs already expanded, about half of a breath, maybe 3/4 of a breath. So the ribs are already kind of expanded. Now, and there isn't necessarily air in the lung. It's so much, there is, but not so much, is that the chest is already in an expanded state. And so when we take a breath from our solar plexus or our diaphragm all the way down through our abdomen, all the way down to our second diaphragm, again, as we go to take a breath to sing, we go, and we pull in, kind of like with the sensation of going to the bathroom, number 2. I hate to use that example, but that is kind of what it's like. But you breathe in, you take in the whole diaphragm. Now, it's also extremely important, and I always say extremely this and critical that. No, these things really are all those things. They're especially at the building block stage, that we relax the breath. So once we're done, relax. And so forth. So we have a total strength in the abdomen, and we're pulling in the abdomen. Now, here's what happens. Now, the diaphragm looks like a crescent moon directly underneath the sternum, underneath the rib cage. And when we take in the breath, it contracts like this, and it goes this direction. Now, when the ribs are expanded, it builds a snap of air, a snap, like a vacuum of air. And if we can control, again, or mitigate and control that feeling of the strength of rib cage expansion, where these muscles, they're called intercostal muscles that are in the lung. And these intercostal muscles, kind of the ribs, when you eat baby back pork ribs and you're eating the ribs off the muscles, those are those muscles that are in your ribs. When you are able to have the strength of your rib cage in an expanded state, it creates a vacuum of air where you have what's called, I call a snap of air. Now, a quick demonstration of that would be if I had a guitar and I was sitting here, not even a guitar. In fact, let me grab this here real quick. So if I come over here and I grab this chair, right, and have this chair and have a snap of air in the chair, and I go like this with my finger and I go. That's if I were to breathe from my lung. Very exhausting, by the way. You only last 2 to 3 songs with that. But if I have a snap of air from my abdominal cavity where I can use it, it's a big difference in the amount of the snap of air that I can get and the strength that I could get and the amount of relaxation response that I can get out of my lung and my chest from this experience. Now, let's move up a little closer. I'll try to walk a little closer here so you can see this up close and personal. Let's do this again. My lungs are kind of expanded. Here's my abdomen. I'm going to take a breath in for the singing. So I'm going to go, here's my breath. Let's do it again. Here's my breath. La, and I pull it in. I pull it in as I'm doing the breath. Now I'm about to do something else, which is going to show you a different exercise that will really help you understand this. But it's very important to note how critical this is. Without it, again, Simon says, without this breath, you can do nothing. You're like Fred Flintstone in the Flintstone Mobile. For those of you who remember that cartoon series back in the 70s where his feet were his engines. A whoop, 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 whoop. His feet were doing all the work. You've got no engine to drive your car. So this is the engine that drives your car. And I want you to practice this as much, if not more than anything else we do. Now, there's a few things also I want to point out to this. Now, as we breathe in and out, it's a very awkward feeling. It's not natural at first. I said, I'll never ask you to do anything unnatural. Well, this is actually not unnatural. And I said I was going to address the idea of the yoga breath. Well, the yoga breath is actually a breath to go as a relaxation response. And that's awesome because the exhale of that is the relaxation response. In singing, the exhale of that, or the pulling in of the breath, is the strength, the engine that drives your car for singing. So we're going to move on to part 2 of this now so you can see how this applies and an actual grass level or roots level thing of how this is going to feel when you're laying down and on the ground. And I'm going to build something up for you in a second. So let's move on to part 2 of diaphragmatic support.